Hello and welcome to another study on the Psalms. In this lesson, we are going to be starting an examination of the 16th Psalm. This is a Psalm of David. It is a prophetic psalm, a messianic psalm, and it is perhaps best known for the utterance, the prophetic utterance of verse 10. You will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor let your Holy One see corruption. This verse is quoted twice in the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 13. But though the psalm is best known for this particular verse, perhaps the theme of the verse is found in verse 6. I have a beautiful inheritance. Let's begin our examination of the psalm by going ahead and reading David's words. A miktam of David. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. The sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, or take their names on my lips. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor let your Holy One see corruption. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. The introduction to the psalm describes it as a miktam of David. We don't know what the term miktam means exactly. There are some suggestions concerning this word. There is a related word which can mean writing, and some suggest that miktam is a word which itself means gold, and therefore the term is sometimes thought to mean to be engraved on gold, or in other words, a writing meant to be preserved. Others have suggested that it is perhaps related to some word implying a secret or a mystery, and therefore suggests some deep or secret thought. Translators, in their humility, have wisely left it untranslated because, again, we really don't know what it means. But this is a Psalm of David, and the authorship is not disputed by believers because it is attested to in the New Testament twice, as I've already mentioned, in Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 13. Moreover, while there are those that would say this is primarily a psalm which we should first apply to David and then maybe secondarily to Christ, the Apostle Peter strongly disagreed with that interpretation. In Acts chapter 2, in his sermon on the day of Pentecost, the Apostle Peter says concerning this, he quotes it in Acts chapter 2, verses 27 and 28. You will not abandon my soul to Hades, or let your Holy One see corruption. You've made known to me the paths of life. You will make me full of gladness with your presence. And Peter says, brothers, I may say to you with confidence about the patriarch David that he both died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Being therefore a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him that he would set one of his descendants on the throne, he foresaw and spoke about the resurrection of the Christ, that he was not abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. This Jesus God raised up, and of that we are all witnesses. So Peter, through inspiration, says, No, David was not writing about himself. We cannot apply this psalm to David. We must apply it to the Christ who rose from the dead. The Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 13 also makes reference to this psalm, beginning in verse 35. Therefore he says also in another psalm, "You will not let your Holy One see corruption." For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid with his fathers and saw corruption. But he whom God raised up did not see corruption. And so two apostles, the Apostle Peter and the Apostle Paul, both said concerning this psalm, no, this is not about David. This psalm is about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, as we examine the psalm and we take the words of the apostles into consideration, we notice in verse 1 the cry, "Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge." Now, this is really the only place in the entirety of the psalm, excepting perhaps the passage about the grave and corruption, where we can see the turmoil and distress of the speaker. And if this is a psalm of the resurrection, a cry of confidence in God by Christ upon the cross, then verse 1 must refer to the events of the cross, to the trial and the betrayal and the beatings that Jesus endured, and to the being nailed to the cross and lifted up and being in agony there. And so if we can put this psalm in that context, and the New Testament says we can get a better picture of the message to us. Now, on the one hand, the message is very clear. Jesus trusted in God, God rewarded his trust, and Jesus was risen from the dead. That basic message is the one that the apostles apply most readily to the psalm, and again, primarily to verse 10, that you will not let your Holy One see corruption. God gave Jesus life, and so Jesus trusted in God, and most of the psalm is about that trust, that faith in God, and God answered that trust with life. So the trust of Jesus was well placed in God. But if we look at the psalm a little bit deeper, we can see perhaps some deeper applications and some applications to ourselves. There is, of course, the basic application that if Jesus trusted in God and God took care of him, then we too can trust in God. And in fact, if we look at verse 1, that is the message. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. Now, there can scarcely be a trial much greater than that which Jesus faced. He was betrayed by one of his close companions. He was given a mock trial where evil men falsely accused him, and those evil men then conspired to put him to death. He was handed over to unbelievers, and these unbelievers likewise conspired with the Jewish leaders in order to put Jesus to death. In the meantime, Jesus was being beaten by those that were accusing him and putting him on trial. He was flogged, he was mocked, he was ridiculed, he was spat upon. And so Jesus is going through all of these trials, and then he is placed on the cross, and on the cross his cry is, "Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge." Jesus did not perceive his trials and tribulations to be a reason to turn away from God, but rather it was an opportunity to affirm his faith in God. There's a lesson there to us. Sometimes when we face trials and tribulations, we are tempted to turn away from God. But those same trials and tribulations can be an opportunity to affirm our faith in God and to grow in our faith. Now, As Jesus goes on, as the writer goes on, he presents then in verses 2, 3, and 4 what I would describe as a threefold worldview. That is, he is looking at three different aspects of the world around him, and he's making a statement of faith about each one. In verse 2, he affirms his faith in God and his dedication to God. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. God alone was to be served as God. But more than that, notice that statement, I have no good apart from you. And again, we must put it in the context of the cross. Jesus, even in the midst of his suffering, is saying, God, you're still my God, and anything good in my life, it comes from you. Now, the second thing that he says then in verse 3 concerns the righteous of the saints of the earth, the righteous. As for the saints in the land, or the righteous, they are the excellent ones in whom is all my delight. When he considers the people around him, those that he was fondest of, those that he most enjoyed the company of, they were righteous, godly men. Those were the ones for whom he sought true companionship. Now, Jesus, he associated with sinners, he taught sinners, he ate with sinners, but the ones he truly enjoyed, the delight of his soul, they were the righteous ones, the ones who chose to be servants of God. And again, Jesus on the cross, surrounded by evil men, he's able to say, there are righteous men, and they're the ones I really want to be with. And then thirdly, and this is interesting, again, especially in the context of the cross, the sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, or take their names on my lips. And so here we have the statement, the understanding that when men turn away from God to idolatry and sin, to wickedness, their sorrows will multiply. And the wise man stays away from such behaviors and such endeavors. Now, think about how interesting, or strange maybe even to some, but how powerful as well a statement this is. Jesus is on the cross suffering horribly, and he's looking at the sinful around him saying, they're the ones whose sorrows will really multiply. They're the ones who are going to really have it bad. We notice when Jesus was marching to the cross and there were women weeping for him, he said, women, don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves. Weep for this city. Weep for these people who are going to face real sorrows yet to come because of the sin of rejecting him. Now, the conclusion then is this, verse 5, the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. I'm not going to turn away from God. I have made a choice to serve God. I've made a choice to love God's people. I've made a choice to reject sin. And now here at my hour of trial, in my suffering, in my sorrow, in my tribulation, I'm not going to reject God. It calls to mind to me the words of Lot, who faced with great trials himself would say, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Again, trials are not an excuse or a reason to turn away from God. They're an opportunity to affirm our faith in God. But before we close this out, let's look then at verse 6. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. What optimism on the cross. What optimism to say, I've had a good life. Things have worked out well for me. I have joy. I have a beautiful inheritance. And then consider the words of Hebrews and where these words come from in the context of the scriptures, and scriptures such as Psalm 16. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and he has sat down at the right hand of God. Jesus had joy on his heart, in his mind, as he was on the cross. Yes, there was suffering. Yes, there was pain. Yes, there was tribulation, and we cannot minimize that. And yet, Jesus had had a joyful life. The clouds of the moment do not take away the sun. They may obscure the sun, but the sun is still there. And so it is too with the promises of God. God has promised his people, his children, a beautiful inheritance. And we can ask ourselves, are we with Christ here in the midst of our sorrows and pain, saying, I have a beautiful inheritance. I have had a good life. The lines have been drawn for me in pleasant places. The Lord is my chosen portion. He's my cup. He holds my lot. That is, he has my future in his hands. We'll have more to say about this psalm as we go on and look at the second half, but let's just consider as we close out this lesson the question: are we trusting in the beautiful inheritance? Do we have the faith that Christ had as he went to the cross, the faith that he's demonstrating to us through this psalm? I hope that this lesson has been of some benefit to you, and until our next time together, you have a fantastic day, and God bless you.